Alright, so tonight we're sitting with Meni Rosenfeld, Vitalik Ron Gross, and Dominik. I'm going to do some Q&A to ask you about what do you guys think about certain Bitcoin related stuff. So feel free to just answer whatever you think. I'll just start with okay, this is going to be specifically regarding your business lately on. What do you guys think about Mastercoin, and what's your take on it? That's something that's been asked a lot in the Israeli Bitcoin community.
So you want to do it in order, or
I think maybe you should go first. And
let's hear your opinion first.
All right. So I'm quoting or paraphrasing Willett here when when he wrote his white paper, his original white paper 1.5 years ago. He said something like, "It's obvious there will be protocols built on top of Bitcoin, right? And because it's possible. So why not build one? Why not be the first to build such a protocol and see where we can take this?" Now Mastercoin is using the Bitcoin protocol as an infrastructure to just we get all these capabilities from the blockchain for free, or not really for free. We're paying all the transaction fees, but for no development cost, and we just have free range to come really and develop a whole new slew of features that security feature, currency features, betting features, other financial instruments. I think the project obviously has a lot of potential. I'm on the board of directors, and I'm going to focus primarily on that for now.
Okay, so definitely Mastercoin is a very interesting concept with a lot of potential. There are some very good people working on it, such as Ron and such as J.R. Willett. However, with both the ideas and the implementation, there are a lot of different problems. One of them is the way Mastercoins were issued. So if you take any cryptocurrency, and the Mastercoin is also a type of cryptocurrency because it's based on units of Mastercoins, so every currency needs to figure out how to issue itself and over which period of time. Now usually you have a trade-off where if the currency is issued over a longer period of time,
like Bitcoin?
Yeah, so Bitcoin is an example for one of the slowest issuing currencies that have existed. So if it's issued slowly, then it's more expensive to do the issuing, especially if you issue based on the waste of energy resources. However, the longer it is, the more decentralized the currency is. If you do a very short period of issuing, then only those who happen to hear about it in the first few days can be in the game on equal terms.
Like what happened with Mastercoin issuing, basically.
Yeah, right. So what I want to say that if you take Bitcoin and you take the average time that each Bitcoin was issued, you get 6 years. Whereas with Mastercoin, if you take the average time Mastercoin was issued, it's 2 weeks. So there's a difference by a factor of 140. So Mastercoin is much more centralized than Bitcoin, and this is, I think, is antithetical to what we are trying to do with this whole decentralized cryptocurrency world. Now, it's also centralized in the sense that the issuing was based on sending funds, which were all funneled to one specific organization, or in the beginning one specific person holding all the funds of the issue.
What's your personal opinion on Mastercoin itself, though? Not the concept of Mastercoin, but Mastercoin itself.
Okay, which parts of Mastercoin?
Well, let's phrase it this way. Do you recommend people to join Mastercoin and start buying Mastercoins? I've heard that recently their value gone up 100%, 1,000% since the issue. Yeah. So would you recommend people jumping on the train?
Yeah, well, I don't make such a combination. It could be an interesting investment. I myself am invested in Mastercoin, so it could be interesting, it could be profitable, but I'm not going to recommend it to anyone. And so like I said, it's an interesting project, but another problem with this is that it's maybe has too much aspiration. So some of the things it says it's going to do, I don't think they are economically even possible. So, so in that sense,
like what?
there's an issue. For example, the escrow funds that are supposed to stabilize a given asset, stabilize its value in comparison to some real-world assets, such as gold or some traditional currency. So the Willet has some ideas about how to do it, and I personally don't believe they are going to work. And there's also the issue that at least right now, I don't know what it will evolve into in the future, but right now, technically, the way Mastercoin transactions work, they are technically not very robust, and the way they do it, it's not true to the nature of Bitcoin transactions, and it prevents you from doing some things. For example, if you want to do a simplified payment verification client, a lightweight client, you cannot do it with the current form of Mastercoin transactions because it's based on messages that update the global state, so you don't have this local consistency to verify transactions.
Same question to you. What do you think about Mastercoin?
Okay, so I'll admit that at first I didn't have too high opinions of it. Like when I first heard about it, I saw this this guy with a ridiculous Bitcoin talk avatar, arrogantly creating this white paper that he called the second Bitcoin white paper, and then creating this whole centralized protocol where he would basically sold all of the Mastercoins in existence. And then I saw, wait, how exactly did he get over $500,000 into this thing? So, more recently though, I realized that the Mastercoin protocol definitely does have quite a lot of useful features in it that Bitcoin definitely would have benefited from. Like, I like the idea of multiple currencies, of decentralized markets, especially with order books on the blockchain. Also, and the other nice thing with Mastercoin is that it's still a fast-moving protocol. They can come up with interesting new things like on-blockchain bets, maybe in the future contracts for difference, these sort of self-stabilizing escrow funds, which may work, they may not. On the other hand, though, I do think that the whole sort of centralized issuance model is upwards of concern. Like, I don't think that sort of fundamental protocols should privilege any single party in any single way. Like, obviously, full neutrality is impossible simply because, like, even Bitcoin privileges people who are born now as opposed to those who might be born in 4 centuries. But I mean, here you have a protocol whose initial issue is designed to funnel Bitcoins into the wallet of one specific organization. So I don't think that's necessarily the way that protocol should work.
Okay, so in general, you guys saying Mastercoin is an interesting idea.
Yeah.
It might work actually, or you're really supporting it right now, but it might have some problems in the future. Okay, what do you guys think about Primecoin?
So Primecoin is also interesting, and yeah, it's good to develop a proof of work function that is not based on hashes but on some new concept. However, one of its supposed selling features is that the calculations it does are actually useful, which I don't agree with. I mean, it's just finding some chains of prime numbers. I don't think there's actually any value to these calculations. It's and even if there was, the marginal utility of these calculations is going to diminish. So maybe right now there's some good thing that can be that can come out of finding new chains, but over time the world will have enough prime chains and there will not be enough value in all the work that's done.
So Primecoin is a no, basically.
Well, I mean, I don't think it really has an advantage over the other currencies in some hash functions.
I would say that actually, I'm a huge Primecoin supporter, but I'm not going to defend like finding a bit along like 13-unit long Cunningham chains of prime numbers. I think the real value in Primecoin is if you look at what's going to happen once people start making specialized hardware for it. Because, for example, if you look at the Bitcoin market, Bitcoin market, you have ASICs, you have these companies pumping millions of dollars into making computers whose sole purpose is to calculate SHA-256 on billions of very similar inputs in parallel. What's the point of that? Bitcoin mining and password cracking. Literally, that's it. With Primecoin, on the other hand, if people start putting millions of dollars into figuring out new ways of finding Cunningham chains, like that may well simultaneously bring new either breakthroughs or at the very least small incremental steps in figuring out how to efficiently multiply and divide numbers, test primality, even find new mathematical algorithms. So I think specifically in that regard, Primecoin is much more useful.
I think the value of Cunningham chain of prime numbers is hard to measure, right? As we look at it right now, we might have no real world value, but does art have value? Does mathematical theorems have value? I don't know. I look at Primecoin as an experiment. I'm not saying it's a real competitor to Bitcoin, of course, but I am invested a bit just for the heck of it. I like this kind of innovation. I think it opens up a new space of maybe other currencies that will follow it, and it's all but it's with the creators are the same creators behind Primecoin, which has also been a significant innovation. So I'm seeing sort of a pattern here. I think that might follow up with something even more interesting.
So it's an experiment. Currently, you say does have some kind of value for the future. You two guys, you're not completely sure about it. How much value is it going to be?
Yes, I mean, like I said, there will be some value right now, maybe some additional research, but eventually there will be too much money invested into this, into mining Primecoins that then can actually benefit humanity. So,
but people are arguing that Bitcoin mining is wasteful because you're just doing password cracking and doing some hashes, and it's completely useful except Bitcoin mining, which I completely disagree with, because I think mining Bitcoin and securing Bitcoin is an important thing to do. And you're saying that Primecoin is interesting, but it doesn't have any value.
yes, so like I said, it's more or less equivalent to Bitcoin in this way. So mining SHA-256 hashes doesn't have any value other than securing Bitcoin, which is of course very important. And likewise for Primecoin, I don't think the value in doing these calculations and the research to make these calculations more efficient, I don't think there's a lot of value in that beyond securing the currency.
Also, there's that other feature of Primecoin that's sort of underappreciated: 1-minute block confirmations. Like, for example, remember back at the beginning of October when Silk Road crashed? I heard about it like around maybe about half an hour after it happened. The problem is though is that I could have taken advantage of that news and I could have sold and I could have made some money there. But the thing is that Bitcoin takes an hour to get into an exchange, so I didn't have the opportunity to actually make any money in time. If I was using Primecoin on the other hand, Primecoin, 6 minutes into an exchange, right there, 6 confirmations.
Well, that's not a fundamental property of the protocol. I mean,
yeah,
Bitcoin could have 1-minute confirmation as well if people decided that it's a useful feature.
Well, on the other hand, Bitcoin could have Cunningham chain proof of work if people decided that it's useful. So.
Yes, so I want also to comment specifically on the exchanges. Some exchanges currently require 6 confirmations, but they don't have them. And even if they take just 2 or 3 confirmations, it's still very secure. Of course, it can depend on the amount and the history of the customer. So if a new customer comes and deposits 1 million Bitcoins, then yeah, they will want 6 confirmations, or maybe more. But if someone who has some history and puts in some, I don't know, 100 Bitcoins to sell, they really don't need these 6 confirmations. And of course, like I said, the parameter for the interval between blocks, it's not some innovation, it's something that we can change if we want. And also there are layers above the protocol to fix that. So you have micropayment channels, and you can include this in a more general framework to allow you to make instant payments to any party without any waiting for confirmations. So I don't think reducing the block time parameter is necessarily very good. And there are also, of course, many disadvantages with it. If you decrease this parameter, then you have much more forks, and a lot more hash rate is wasted on these forks. So
basically,
but you wrote the article that explains why lower confirmation time is actually beneficial for the network security.
Yes, indeed. If we look just at the very basic implementation, but actually, usually what I say that yes, a shorter block time can allow more security in less time, but it doesn't really matter because you can have micropayment channels, and because in most applications either you want it in a few seconds or you don't care if it's 1 hour. So, like I said, it is an advantage, but not so much, and there are also negative trade-offs from it.
so basically the two advantages for Primecoin to Shanapal for Primecoin are basically faster confirmations and the possibility of finding new prime numbers. Okay. Moving on to Dominik, do you have anything to add?
Not specifically to Primecoin, because I haven't done this in-depth research on Primecoin or on Mastercoin yet. But when we were talking about wasting energy on Bitcoin and whatever, I don't really believe in these critics, because if you think about what one single skyscraper of any bank needs for energy and all the employees to get to the skyscraper working there, and with Bitcoin we get a global payment system, a global currency,
Which is cheaper than a single
yeah,
cell.
definitely, and
Good point.
Bitcoin helps to save energy, in fact.
I agree with you completely.
On the other hand, I'm sure there might even exist skyscrapers that have more net worth in them than the Bitcoin network as it stands today.
Okay, if nobody has anything to add on the Primecoin, Mastercoin, I'm going to move on to a different question. Okay, what do you guys think needs to happen to Bitcoin in order for it to be widespread adoption?
I think we should just keep doing what we're doing.
Meaning?
You know, it's a long campaign, and when Satoshi started, and when we found out about Bitcoin, each in his own time, we realized that it's not something that has to happen at a particular very quick pace. It can take 5 more years, 10 more years, 20 more years. There's a lot of progress that we've seen over the last few years. We can talk about specific, events that might happen on the way to a more massive adoption, right? I don't think it's any singular event. I think it's just a massive chain or network of events that each of them is triggering the next one, like dominoes, right? We have more users finding out about that, about the currency. These users are asking various businesses to accept it. The businesses advertise. Eventually, this gets government attention and regulation. Maybe they're looking at the higher valuation of the currency and how it's starting to hopefully or someday affect the global markets. The regulators are understanding, gaining information, understanding what they can do or can't do about the currency, and when they're speaking, this triggers the other cycles again. I mean, for example, a year ago there was, I think, very little information, or almost zero information from the regulatory standpoint. Finally, this year, regulators all over the world started looking into it and issuing various statements about Bitcoin. And we've seen that these statements, well, they haven't been very positive necessarily, but they haven't also been very negative, right? Maybe neutral, maybe just defining how people should work with this. And once the regulators have spoken, this triggers more people to adopt it because they don't fear, Bitcoin being banned or illegalized anywhere. And it's this cycle that's keep repeating, and I think the intensity, the volume of this cycle will just increase over the next few years.
So you're saying we're already doing what's needed to be done for Bitcoin to become mass adopted, it's just a matter of time.
Yeah, right. So I agree completely with Ron, and I want maybe to summarize and say that Bitcoin right now has a certain status the volatility of the exchange rate is some degree, and the amount of businesses that accept it is some amount, and the software tools that exist to make working with Bitcoins easier, they are at a certain level, and with this kind of status, there is a circle of people who are willing to use Bitcoin, who can, can slide over the volatility and who can work with the current tools. And the people in this circle work to improve the status of Bitcoin, to get more businesses to adopt it, to develop the technology and so forth. And once we do that, the circle increases, and then there are more people who want to.
You don't think that there is something singular that could happen to increase widespread adoption tomorrow, for example?
It could. I mean, I don't really think it can be sustainable. I mean, we have seen occasions where something caused a huge rush into Bitcoin, but if the infrastructure can't support it, it won't help. So what we've seen multiple times is that there is indeed some event or combination of events that bring people in, but the infrastructure was not yet developed enough to accept all this income. So then we've seen huge fluctuations in the exchange rate and bubbles that pop and people who want to buy Bitcoins and can't and so on. So because there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be built, I don't think any sudden increase because of any one event, it cannot be sustainable.
Do you have anything to add?
Not really, actually.
Okay. On the same topic, do you guys think Bitcoin is ready now for mass adoption?
Not really. I mean, it's ready for more adoption that we have now, but there's still much more room to go until it can be really used by everyone.
Yeah, I mean, people are used to a different class of quality, of finish from various systems they interact with today, and Bitcoin just isn't there yet. Just the fact that I need to explain over and over again to each person how to buy Bitcoins, how to secure them, how to work with them, and it doesn't just work. This means that it's not ready for the late adopters, it's ready for the early adopters.
Isn't similar to how email works? I mean, you had to explain how email works to late adopters, and it was complicated for them initially, but now every person on earth knows how to use email.
Yeah, but at first, when they first started to use email, it was just it was very difficult. You'd have all these various programs you had to install, and then most of them were in operating systems that the general public didn't even use. I mean, I think it's maybe a good parallel, but the infrastructure got better around email as well.
It is also a valid point that the culture does sort of need to adapt somewhat to be able to work with Bitcoin more. I mean, just imagine like if we all were just using Bitcoin or just using credit cards or whatever now, and someone tried to introduce cash, and you're thinking, okay, so I have to solve a subset sum problem in my head every time I want to pay some number of cents. That's NP hard, correct? So, like, and even like turning on computers using a web browser, like I think people will get used to, like, there are definitely ways in which Bitcoin is different from the payment systems that we have now, and some of part of the reason why it's hard to use is, part of its interfaces, part of it is because
it's just different.
Yeah, exactly, it's just different. So, like in China, for example, I think one of the reasons why it's catching on so well is that the Chinese had Qcoin, which is a virtual currency. It got really popular in 2007. So virtual currency and just any other virtual currency and Bitcoin, those are very similar because like you have a wallet, you have some units of a virtual currency, you can send it to people. It's
So you're basically saying Bitcoin is ready for mass adoption right now. Technically, I mean, I'm not talking about the tools around it. I'm saying just Bitcoin itself as a protocol, as a tool itself.
Well, actually, about Bitcoin as a protocol, there are many open problems. I mean, for example, I think the most important open problem right now is what to do with the transaction fees. So most people think they understand how transaction fees will work once we no longer have minting of new coins, but they really don't. It's a problem which nobody really knows what will happen, and some solution will need to be done. And the main problem is that if in the future we remove the block size limit, which is currently 1 megabyte, and there's no minting of new coins, then the marginal cost of including a transaction in a block will be close to zero. So there will be very fierce competition between the miners, and basically everybody will include all transactions even if their fees are very low. And once this happens, the users will not have an incentive to pay fees, and then the total revenue that can be obtained by miners is low, and the total network hash rate will match the total revenue, and it will be low, and the network will be vulnerable to attack. So this is what happens with more or less the current protocol, and people think that the free market will take care of it, but it doesn't, because you have an extra degree of freedom here. So without imposing some constraint on the system, it will just be a race to the bottom because of the tragedy of the commons between the miners. So there are a few ideas for how to fix it. For example, I think we should include some sort of limit per block on the total value transacted. This will give the miners the bargaining power they need to keep the fees reasonably high. But of course, this is a change that could be very controversial. So it's an open problem. We need to find out some solution. We haven't found it yet, and this is a core protocol issue that will prevent the Bitcoin from scaling up and continuing into the future without some sort of change.
Okay.
Although, fortunately for Bitcoin, though, it's still quite a long time until that particular issue becomes important, and also just because the block reward is going to go down slowly, it's not going to be something that comes upon us suddenly. We do still have decades to understand this.
Okay. I think it's related to the question I asked earlier, but what do you think is stopping Bitcoin from being adopted right now by the masses? I mean, why isn't everybody just using Bitcoin right now? It has so many useful properties. It's fast. It's relatively cheap.
They can't use it. They can't spend it. They don't. If someone had Bitcoin from the street, they don't know what to do with it. They can't pay their friends. They can't pay in the grocery. They can't.
So it's a network effect.
Yeah, it's just a network effect.
And also, I think another contributing factor is all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's spread in the media. So many people, when they first hear about Bitcoin, they hear about it in a negative context. And even if they don't, they later search Google and find all sorts of media articles, and many of them are very negative. So it creates some scare effect. I mean, even if someone hears 9 positive things about Bitcoin and 1 negative thing, it can scare him. It can create some sort of doubt, which will cause him to say, okay, I don't want to touch it. It's dangerous. Maybe there's some risk. So that could also scare a lot of people.
I'd still say there are some serious legitimate issues with Bitcoin as well. So, for example, a big one is wallet security. So, people aren't going to be just storing $20,000 on a file on their desktop.
Some people do.
Well, yes, some people do, but it's not a very.
Do you think wallet security is something that's stopping Bitcoin adoption right now?
I think it's definitely one of the I think I'm sure it's contributing negatively to its reputation to some extent. There are stories of people losing Bitcoins. There are stories of them getting stolen. And as Bitcoin continues to expand, I think.
But I mean, our day-to-day wallets, the physical wallets that we have, they have very limited security, and that's
the thing with physical wallets, that your physical wallet has only a few $100s in it.
Okay.
You have bank accounts where the bulk of the money is stored. So you want Bitcoin to approach the same level of practical security as bank accounts do.
Yeah, and I think related to this question, it's also that people out there mostly don't have really an imagination what really is money, and people have these paper bills printed by the government and think it's money because they can grasp it somehow, even if most of the money which is issued by the government is also just digital ones and zeros. I have heard this many times that people, oh, this is Bitcoin just in digital, in the computer and something, but most of our fiat money is also just in the computers, and these printed paper bills are also in fact nothing, just backed by the government, but you see its value declining, and there's no reason, if an economy becomes more and more efficient, that products get more and more expensive, if not anything is wrong with the money.
Yeah, so another issue is just time. I mean, even if the status of Bitcoin stays exactly the same it is today, I think in 10 years people will have an easier time adopting it, because it's been around longer, it has proven that it can survive, that it's not some fad. So I think time plays in our favor, and the more time that passes and the more people see that all the naysayers and all the prophecies that Bitcoin is going to disappear, I don't know what, they see that it's not true, they will have an easier time to accept it.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. I had one of my talks, I was describing 3 possible scenarios for Bitcoin, right?
Okay, go ahead. No, I'm just gonna ask. I wanted to use his words to segue to the next question, which is, what do you guys think about Bitcoin adoption in the next 2 years, and where Bitcoin is going to be in the next 2 years and 5 years from now?
Yeah.
So you can start, as I'm guessing
this
is what exactly.
So this is a good gateway. So I was describing 3 possible scenarios that can happen. I'm not talking about specific time frames, but Bitcoin can either fail completely, its value can drop significantly, maybe even close to 0. It can stagnate for a bit, just as Meni described, just remain at the same level of usage, of value, maybe of infrastructure, and it can win, right? It can take a really critical portion of the population and just really take over. Now, these are 3 theoretical scenarios. There might be others, but the second one, the middle one, that it stagnates, might not be a real possibility, because if we had Bitcoin running for 20 years with the same level of stabilization and features that we have today, then it's a logical conclusion that it would increase adoption further, right? I don't really see it staying long term over dozens of years at the same level.
Okay, so I want to use that one to segue to the next question. Basically, is what do you guys think where Bitcoin is going to be in 2 years from now, and where it's going to be in 5 years from now? I mean, like a prediction.
Okay, so right now we're seeing a lot of venture capital interest in Bitcoin, so that means a pretty obvious sign that in 2 years there's going to be a lot more Bitcoin startups. So we'll see the next wave will be, first of all, there's going to be a lot more interest in Bitcoin from a financial standpoint. So for example, in China there's a lot of interest in Bitcoin as a store of value. In the US you have all these sort of Bitcoin funds, so that's sort of one area that Bitcoin might move forward, sort of as the new gold. And another area is just technologies that make it easier for people to buy Bitcoins, to use Bitcoins, and to accept them.
How much do you think it's going to be worth in 2 years from now?
Its expected value is currently 258-ish.
$250 in 2 years from now.
Well, if the market is efficient, then the expected value of a Bitcoin 10 years from now is $250.
300. Oh, sorry, I didn't understand.
He just believes the market.
Yeah. So Vitalik is basically saying that actually it's not really accurate. But what Vitalik is saying is that if the market right now says that each Bitcoin is $250, it means that the market expects that on average this is what the Bitcoin will be worth. So for example, if the market thinks that in 2 years there's a, I don't know, a 25% chance that the Bitcoin will be worth $1,000, the 75% chance that it will be worth 0. So right now people are willing to pay $250 for it.
Right. So
No,
But-
what I'm asking
but
is,
yeah,
what do
yeah,
you
yeah.
think it's going to be
Yeah,
worth
yeah.
2 years from now?
Yeah, but
yeah, so
Vitalik, yeah, but okay,
there is a weakness in that approach. But
yeah, so I want to add something that in simple way, what Vitalik is saying, that he believes the market, and if he believed that the expected value was more than $250, then he'd spend all his money on buying bitcoins.
yeah, well, not
But
necessarily all.
but the issue here is risk and variance. So
Yeah.
even if the market in a combination thinks that the future value in 2 years will be, let's say, $500, then they will still not buy the bitcoins right now at this price because of the risk. So depending on what is the size of the market, it affects this estimation. So it's so because of this, the current price of Bitcoin will be its expected future value minus some risk premium. So the expected future value still.
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm asking is, what is Bitcoin going to be worth 2 years from now?
Yes, so
November 2015.
Yes, so I mean, of course, I'm not a prophet. I don't want to make any predictions that people will laugh at me later. But if you look, I mean, I think a reasonable scenario is that in 2 years it will be worth 10 times what it is now. So maybe $2,000. And yeah, and in 5 years, maybe 100 times what it is now. So maybe $20,000. So that's of course an optimistic projection, but I think it's possible.
I think it's obvious that you have the market and its predictions, but you're asking a room full of Bitcoin bulls.
Of course,
right?
I'm asking you guys, what do you think it's going to be worth 2 years and 5 years from
We're
now?
not buying what the market is telling us, that Bitcoins are only worth $250. Right? We're all investing in Bitcoins. I think Meni's projections are a good sort of ballpark. It's going to continue, I think it's going to continue in some exponential growth, although maybe at a slightly lower pace. I forgot my crystal ball at home, so...
Yeah, right. Well,
Even so, Vitalik, I want to hear what you think is going to be worth 2 years and 5 years from now?
yeah, well, but it depends. Well, I think generally technologies follow sort of a very similar growth pattern, at least on the internet. They go exponential until they go linear, until they eventually stabilize at some level. So, like, where is Bitcoin going to stop going exponential? I really don't know. Like, as long as it is still, it does keep on going exponential, like, it would probably keep on growing by like a factor of 5 to 10 every year. But I do expect that that'll slow down pretty soon.
So figures, 2 years from now, how much is going to be worth?
You really want to figure, do you?
Yes, I do.
He wants to hold it against you when the figure doesn't check out.
What if I say $73?
$73.
Will you
in 2
be
years.
happy about Will you be happy about me saying $73?
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay, $73.
5 years from now, $73.
$72.
$72. You have any different prediction?
I've read something about that the value of Bitcoin doubled round about each 100 days in average. Yeah, now you do the maths.
No, you did that. Tell me what you think. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I think because of the network effect and also because of the macroeconomic stuff which is going to happen outside, if you look at all the debts of the governments and what can happen there. This Cyprus was just a blueprint. I think everyone here in the room knows this. So even 5-digit is possible, definitely.
Alright, cool. I personally think that next year we're going to see the figures go about to 4 figures for every Bitcoin, and I think we're going to cross the 1,000 mark pretty quickly at the end of the year, sometime next year. But that's just my Alright. What do you think about adoption? Where do you think Bitcoin will be in terms of adoption in 2 years from now? I mean, right now, a lot of the tech people that we know, the people we work with, the companies we work at, most of the people right now are already familiar with Bitcoin, at least at some level. They've heard about it. They have a friend who's bought something or mining or something like that. But the average Joe on the street still doesn't know what Bitcoin is, and far from it. They don't even know how to use it or anything like that. So where do you think it's going to be in 2 years from now?
I think there will be, obviously, if to follow up on the previous question about the price comes with the adoption, right? It goes together. So a lot more people will know about it. I don't know, today I think there are about around 1 million or 2 million people worldwide that are familiar with Bitcoin at a close level, maybe even own Bitcoin. Like I think the total number of wallets on blockchain.info and Coinbase together is around 1 million. So, in 2 years it could be 5 million, 10 million people owning Bitcoin in the world, maybe a bit more.
Yeah, so about the estimates about the current number of users, we need to remember that, let's say, blockchain.info, there are people who have more than one wallet, or there are people who open the wallet once and then forgot about it, or no. So I think the actual number of people who, let's say, who own a positive amount of Bitcoins, I think it's less than 1 million right now, but of course we can't know for sure because people don't have to tell us if they are holding Bitcoins. And about future growth, I think it will be, of course, if everything works well, it will be exponential, but I think with the lower base parameter than the growth in price, because the total utility that can be obtained from Bitcoin is super linear in the number of users because of the network effect. So if I say that in 2 years the price maybe will go up by a factor of 10, I think the number of users, the number of businesses that accept it, I think maybe it will be 3 or 4 times what it is now.
Yeah, that's definitely consistent with what we've seen so far. Like, for example, from the beginning of 2013 to now, the Bitcoin price has gone up by a factor of about 20. Meanwhile, the number of transactions has gone up by a factor of 2 or 3. The number of businesses accepting Bitcoin, at least if BitPay is to be believed, has gone up by, I think, around a factor of something like 5 to 10. So, yeah, it's like adoption is definitely going to be somewhat slower. So
You don't think it's going to accelerate?
no, it will. Well, it is going to be exponential, but as Meni said, it's exponential with a lower base than the.
Yeah, about what Vitalik said about using BitPay as a measure for how many businesses accept Bitcoin, we need to remember that as we progress forward in time, there are more businesses like BitPay that offer these services. So the growth rate of BitPay customers will be lower than the growth rate of businesses in general. So if BitPay will increase by a factor of ×5, then the total number of businesses probably grow in a faster rate. So.
I also think that we'll see Bitcoin in the media, in other forms of media than we've seen so far. I mean, we'll have Hollywood films about Bitcoin or that have certain elements that use Bitcoin. We'll have books, we'll have maybe university classes dedicated to cryptocurrencies in some places. So it will be like another front to expose Bitcoin to new frontiers, basically.
On that topic, there actually are already university classes, like there are either startup courses or web development courses that use Bitcoin as basically.
Yeah.
Here's this basically it is the simplest way to do payment integration without having to set anything up formally. So like once you have a generation of people that use Bitcoin right from the start, that is a very positive sign of Bitcoin adoption like in the longer term.
You have anything to add?
Yeah, definitely. People who start to grow up and know about Bitcoin, that's a totally different situation to the people now who are used to this fiat money system since decades. So that's why I'm also thinking about buying this BitKids book or something. I don't know if you read about this, for my nephew, who is now 4 years old, so he can read about Bitcoin already in this age and get used to it as early as possible.
Do you think it will be different 5 years from now? I mean, do you expect to see Bitcoin anytime soon taking over the world in terms of adoption, starting main usage?
I think becoming really mainstream and taking over the world is something on a time scale of 10 to 20 years. So depending on what exactly we mean, but
Facebook took only 7 years.
Yeah, okay, maybe. I mean,
There are less regulatory issues with Facebook, right? They just
On the other hand, though, regulatory issues are something that wax down on Bitcoin's competitors way more than on Bitcoin itself.
The originaleness of the system is working against it right now.
Bitcoin is anti-fragile.
If you compare it to Facebook, you know, Facebook wasn't the first social network, so the market was already a bit ripe for acceptance, so maybe that shortened their path a bit.
But on the other hand, I'm sorry, Vitalik, on the other hand, you had virtual currencies, and you can compare that to precursors to Facebook.
I don't know. I think the fact that Bitcoin is decentralized makes it a completely different species than all the other currencies. So, yeah.
Well, I would say a good comparison might be Napster and BitTorrent, where Napster would be things like Liberty Reserve, eGold, and all these other sketchy, like transaction currency media, whereas Bitcoin seems to be finally like the one that's actually doing it right. So
I have one generic comment about all these questions of, you know, where will Bitcoin be in 5 years, 10 years? You know, it's important to realize that humans aren't really good at you know, looking at exponential growth and trends and then projecting, right? We see the speed at which things are happening now, and it makes sense to think this, you know, all right, we'll have 2 times, 3 times as much in 3 years or in 2 years, but things just, you know, they reach a certain point, and then they might just reach a singularity point, a financial singularity, right? Maybe in 5 years from now, everything will look, you know, 10 times, 20 times, 100 times as big, but then in the course of 1 year, the entire world converts, right? Or half of the world converts.
Okay, we've touched about this topic a bit earlier, but what do you think about Bitcoin's technical challenges right now? I'm not talking about usability and adoption, I'm talking about what are the technical challenges that Bitcoin is facing right now or will face in the next couple of years.
So I'll mention security again. Like, it is quite easy to lose your money from a Bitcoin wallet. And like there have been several instances of people, even people who have followed very diligent best practices. But like I'll give you some examples. 1 month ago, there was a total of like $5,700 lost because of a bug in Android's random number generator. Sometime before that, there was a guy who lost like something like over 100 Bitcoins because he downloaded a Java applet which just happens to have a keylogger on it.
But I mean more like Meni mentioned it earlier, the block limit size. I consider security as it is right now as a usability issue because it's not a security that somebody can come in and steal your coins. It's just it's less usable or less comfortable to use. But I'm asking more on the technical challenges that Bitcoin faces in general.
Yes, so I think it relates to what I said earlier, but I think the main challenges have to do with the scalability of Bitcoin and who pays for it all. So over time the blockchain will grow bigger and the need for securing the network will become bigger. The question is, who is going to pay for it all and how do we make him pay it?
Are the miners basically paying for it all?
The miners are those who should receive the payment.
But they are paying it and then they're getting paid for it.
But who will pay the miners? So yes.
We do as the users, or Bitcoin right now as the issuer.
Yeah, okay, but how do we make people pay the miners? So like I said, there is a very big problem with the current vision of transaction fees as a way to incentivize miners. Now in addition to miners, there are also the network nodes which don't need to do hashing, but they need to receive the transaction, propagate them, and store them, and verify them.
But that's a future problem, right? This is not a technical problem. This is not a technical challenge right now. It's going to be a problem in 5, 10 years from now, or if Bitcoin is going to suddenly explode and become super popular.
Well,
so first of all, I think we have to separate out 2 problems here. Number one, there's the whole sort of what happens at the end of time when we don't have block rewards anymore. Which is an issue, but I don't think it'll be real relevant for maybe 20 years. The second issue is scalability. So scalability, basically, Visa processes 2,000 transactions a second. Bitcoin with its current parameters can only process 7 transactions a second. Now, obviously, like turning off, changing that number from 7 to 70 or 700 is just a flick of a switch. But once that happens, the question is the blockchain is going to become much bigger. Miners are going to need to store all of that. Miners are going to need to be verifying hundreds of transactions a second, and nodes are going to have to be propagating all this information. So the question
is it something that's really is it really an issue, or is it something that we can fix easily? I mean, the cost of storage is pretty low. The cost of verifying.
Right. So the two.
Yeah, I think that the storage is the lesser problem. I think the propagation in the network and bandwidth, I think that's the bigger problem. And
the internet speeds are going up every year, and
so
Google Fiber and
yeah. So that's the sort of the Moore's law argument, which is that Bitcoin would have to basically keep on doubling every 2 years indefinitely. In order and if it doesn't do that, then eventually the computers will have to catch up eventually, so that might happen. On the other hand, Moore's law might slow down. On the other hand, even in the medium term, in 5 to 10 years, still in 10 years from now, computers might be 32 times as powerful, but Bitcoin might be 30,000 times bigger. So in that case, what do we do?
Yeah, so if we look at the projections that we talked about earlier for the Bitcoin adoption, it grows at a faster rate than Moore's law, as we know so far. So there will be some period of time where the cost of handling all the transactions will be substantial, and also it's not clear how to pay for it, because if I said that we have a problem with paying miners, then paying nodes is even more difficult, because right now nodes don't get any transaction fees at all. So and the cost to run a node will increase over time.
Nodes are basically Bitcoin users who have the entire blockchain on their computer.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
So right now, users who install Bitcoin Qt are network nodes, and their computer receives and propagates transactions. And even right now, running a node is not trivial, mainly because we need to store the entire blockchain. So it's right now, I think, over 10 gigabytes. So maybe it's not so bad on a magnetic drive, but if you do it on an SSD to be a bit faster, then it has some cost, and it will increase over time. And like I said, right now, nodes don't have any built-in incentive in the protocol. So there are some suggestions for protocol upgrades that will deal with that. For example, there's a paper by Aviv Zohar and others about Bitcoin and red balloons, which do offer some incentivization scheme for nodes, but of course it's a big change, it's much more complicated, it's not really sure how it will work. So
I think you've touched on an interesting topic, because one of the main selling points of Bitcoin is the fact that it's completely open, decentralized, and everybody can look at the blockchain and everybody has a copy of the blockchain. But this is like the utopian world that we live in, where everybody has the copy of the blockchain. What actually happens, nobody has the copy of the blockchain except a small number actually of nodes and even small number of miners, right?
Yeah, right, but first it doesn't need to be a small number. I think we can easily have tens or thousands of nodes around.
No, I'm talking about right now. The actual number of nodes is far less than the number of people who are using Bitcoin.
Yeah, right. Well, I don't know the numbers right now, but I think it's at least a few thousands of nodes, so it's also good. And also, maybe if we look again at the future, then maybe not every user will be able to run a full network node, but every user will be able to run an SPV client, which also has some very good...
What's an SPV client?
It's a simplified payment verification client, also known as a lightweight client. It doesn't store the entire blockchain, it stores only the block headers, which are fairly small, and the transactions that interest him, complete with their Merkle branches. So in this way he can verify that the transactions that interest him actually exist and are accepted by the network, and using the block headers he can be sure that he has actually the longest chain right now. So it's not as good as having the full blockchain, but it's also it's good. It allows reasonable security.
You wanted to say something on the topic?
Can't think of anything right now.
Anyone else wants to add on the technical challenges right now for Bitcoin?
I think they covered it pretty well. I mean, there are a few issues, but we have some decent plans of how to attack them in scalability issue specifically.
Alright. Moving on. This couple of questions that have been asked by people from the Israel Bitcoin community. What are the risks for Bitcoin from quantum computing? And can we fix Bitcoin to not be vulnerable to quantum computing?
Okay, so quantum computing, the main risk is there's a quantum algorithm called Shor's algorithm, which can break elliptic curve cryptography. Elliptic curve cryptography being one of the key technologies that Bitcoin uses for security. So specifically, what would happen if someone had a quantum computer that could run Shor's algorithm is that as soon as you make a Bitcoin transaction using some private key, then even right now, as soon as when you make a Bitcoin transaction, there's a public key in the transaction. With Shor's algorithm, you can take that public key and convert it and extract the original private key from it. So essentially, and you can do this very quickly. So the idea is that as soon as you publish a transaction, theoretically, if one of the nodes that the transaction goes through just happens to be a quantum node, you can just run Shor's algorithm, extract your private key, and just swap the transaction for a new one in transit. So essentially, like sending bitcoins will not be secure.
Can we fix it?
Yes, we can, but it would necessitate very serious protocol changes, and it would even like what I think would need to happen is that we need to have two new transaction protocols, where there's be one transaction protocol based on some quantum proof signature algorithm, which do exist, and the second one you would need to have sort of a transition system to let people safely move money from the old system to the new one. But all the math behind it seems to check out. So like.
So there is a fix. Right now, it's not really a risk.
Yeah, right now it's not. So, right.
And if it's becoming a risk, we have theoretical options to overcome that risk.
Yeah. So one thing I want to hope for though is that when quantum computers get developed, it'll be by a large worldwide collaboration of research departments and not by the NSA.
Which most likely will happen, actually. Okay, last question for now at least. Recently there is this private pools keeping blocks issue going around making headlines. Basically, there is the risk of people hijacking the blockchain in order to reap profits from hiding some blocks and not publishing them. How dangerous is it? How feasible is it?
Yeah, so I have a lot to say about that. I don't know where to start, but let's just say that the essential attack is viable. There is really a technique that allows you to strategically hide some blocks, and this way get a higher proportion of the total blocks found than your actual hash rate. Now, to carry on this attack, it also relies very strongly on the network topology. So if you have many nodes and your controller all over the world connected to many other nodes, and you can hear about blocks very fast and you can propagate blocks very fast, then you can have an advantage in a race between tied blocks. Now, if you have such an advantage, then this attack is more effective. If not, it's less effective. So depending on the strategy you use and your connectivity and your hash rate, you can figure out what kind of amplification you have. And
is that a real risk right now?
Right now, I don't think it's a real risk. In the future, maybe. Also, it's
How
not.
How far in the future?
Well, maybe in a few years. I don't know. But actually, some of the derivations and the models used in this particular paper, I think they are not so accurate, and so even though the attack is possible, I think it will be exactly as was written in this paper. Now, actually the idea behind this attack is not new at all. It existed for 3 years more or less, where people on the Bitcoin forum brought up some primitive version of this attack and wrote some numbers, but it was just a basic strategy without full discussion of how the network connectivity affects it and so on. So the idea exists, it's not new. And another thing is that actually there is another researcher that over the past few months has independently done research which is very similar to what was written in this paper, and I think his research is much more thorough, much more accurate. He took the results much further, but he was beat to the punch by the people who wrote this paper. So I think the full discussion and investigation of what is this attack and how to deal with it are best done after he will make public his results. By the way, he also has some suggestions for how to fix this problem. And in light of all of this, I think also that the writers of this paper have made very alarmist headlines, and they are very sensationalist, and it looks like they are trying to draw attention and publicity, maybe more so than the actual research and fixing the problems. So that I think is unfortunate. I mean, we had instances in the past that an academic wrote a paper and the media took it and made sensationalist headlines out of it, but it came from the media, it didn't come from the researcher himself. And in this case we see that the researchers themselves trying to make headlines, and I think that's unfortunate.
I looked at the paper briefly today, I think it was just released yesterday maybe, and there was some kind of discrepancy, maybe of the kind that Meni described it, the article trying to be sensational. So in the body of the article, there is actually some analysis that points that within a few assumptions, within a certain model, then a large enough group of miners would have a benefit over just an honest miner, and would thus attract other miners to join. But from this claim, that requires a large enough group of miners, what was found in the abstract was a sentence that just say any group of miners can have an advantage, even a tiny group has an advantage, and so I can just start my new pool with this new algorithm and grow very quickly. But that is not actually true. You have to have a very large, I think maybe 25% of all the network hash rate just to get a significant advantage. I'm not 100% sure of the details, but there was some discrepancy here between the body of the article and the header, and the conclusions that the article has reached in the body aren't that severe as it first seemed.
So basically, the situation is that the attack that the article describes, they don't really say give a specific parameter for how effective it is, but they say it depends on what they call gamma, where gamma is basically the chance that an attacker will be able to publish a block immediately after the network does, and yet still have the network think that the attacker's block came first. So essentially, if you imagine you control the entire network, then you could say gamma is 1, because as soon as you hear about a block, you can just prevent the rest of the network from hearing about the block, and you can transmit yours instead. So with this alarmist interpretation that the researchers provide, essentially they say that gamma can be arbitrarily close to 1, because potentially attackers can create millions of nodes and insert themselves cleverly position themselves in the network to make sure that their blocks will always win the race, essentially. In reality, though, first of all, we know that for a fact that gamma is less than about at least 0.8, simply because every mining pool is always going to be the first one to hear about its own blocks. From there, first of all, the Bitcoin network already has lots of connections to each other, and I'm sure all the mining pools even have proprietary links at this point. So, I really don't think that it's even possible to sort of silence or interfere with the Bitcoin network to anything close to the extent that the researchers think it is. So, their claim that you can pull off this attack with even 1% network power, that requires gamma to be 1. But in reality, that's not true. You do need at least 25. Even now, you need, I'd say, at least 20%.
Yeah. Also, I think there is a problem that the actual attack is not in order to hurt Bitcoin, but rather to reap some profits from doing the attack, right?
It can be used for both. I mean, it can also amplify the profits from mining, and it can also allow hashrate attacks with lower hashrate than otherwise would be needed. So it can be used for both.
Okay.
I want also to add about what Vitalik said about pools having direct connections with each other and so on. I think maybe that's true now that there are a few large mining pools, but hopefully in the future there will be many smaller pools, and it will be more distributed, and there are some designs that allow to make this happen. And I think when we have more smaller pools, I think it will be harder for the pools to be closer together than the attacker is. So because of this, I think in the future it will be easier to carry this attack.
Yeah, but now that I actually reflect on what you just said, then if we'll have a lot of, not millions of pools, but we'll have, 1,000 pools, then a new pool or any pool that's trying to assess who are the relevant peers it should communicate with can just see who's actually mining blocks and just ignore all the nodes that aren't doing anything.
Well, maybe, but in this attack, the attacker does find blocks. I mean, he can also route the blocks that he finds to whichever node he wants. So, I mean, maybe, I don't know the exact...
Yeah, but I mean, you'll see a lot of different kinds of pools. So you'll get their blocks, but you'll also get the blocks from other places. So they won't have anywhere, I'm certain they won't have more than, the gamma parameter won't be more than half, and probably even much lower.
Maybe, I don't know.
Additionally, I've started saying is that this attack is basically designed to make profits from Bitcoin by taking more than what you actually can make with regular mining. But this forgets the fact that if you're going to do that, you're going to hurt Bitcoin, whether if it was designed to hurt Bitcoin or not. And I think most of the people that are investing their money into Bitcoin, they don't want to hurt Bitcoin. So intrinsically, this sounds like maybe a possibility, but it's not plausible that it's going to happen.
Right.
I mean, nobody has the incentive to actually do that in order to maybe make a little bit more profit from the mining.
Yes, so I think that's true, and because of this, maybe what we should be really worried about is people using this attack to actually do one of the traditional attacks in an easier way. So, for example, one of the main attacks against Bitcoin is to, for example, let's say you're someone who wants to hurt Bitcoin because it's competing with you, or you've just sold short a bunch of Bitcoins, you want the price to go down, then you can use the hashrate attack if you have a majority hashrate to do a denial of service on the network.
Can't we just, once we see this happen, okay, so it can happen once, twice, but it's rather easy to notice it. I mean, it's completely open. If you see one pool generating two blocks one after another, especially when there is a competing block already generated, wouldn't be that look a little bit suspicious? Right. And couldn't we just blacklist those nodes?
Well, I mean, it can look suspicious. I don't think we can blacklist it because blocks don't have an evil bit set. So if the attacker uses different IPs each time or do things like that, then he will continue to attack, and we know that there is an attack, but each time the attacker will look different, so we don't know how to block him. And if if we do want to take this idea further, then maybe it will be a completely new system of reputation for...
Exactly, what if we
so,
force miners to identify themselves in order to avoid that kind of problem?
I mean, maybe, but it's like a completely new protocol. I mean, right now...
No, I mean just not changing the protocol, just, you know, making a whitelist of miners that, you know, these are the miners that all the other miners are talking
Who
with.
controls the miner with the whitelist?
Huh?
Who controls the whitelist?
It's public. It's everybody can join and
well, but each pool or each miner can choose for himself who are the miners that he trusts. But then it's less like Bitcoin and maybe more like Ripple with its
Right.
list
So
of trusted nodes.
the reason why developers are scared about making sort of these mining, like putting in these sort of context-aware heuristics into the mining algorithm is because with potentially you might lose convergence. Like you might enter a state where half the network thinks one chain is better, half the network thinks another chain is better, and the blockchain essentially forks, it splits in half, and you have sort of two different versions of Bitcoin that will keep going forever. Whereas as Bitcoin stands now, the rule is the longer blockchain wins. That's not
no
something
matter what.
Yeah, that's not something you can't really have differing opinions on which blockchain is longer. It's math.
Yeah, so also there are many different upgrades that have been suggested over time for the branch selection mechanism, how to choose which branch to follow and which blocks to rule out. So I mean, maybe there are some good ideas, but each such idea is different than what we have now. It will come with its own set of problems. And like Vitalik said, the main problem is usually that you cannot guarantee convergence with all these modifications.
Yeah, but you could. There's room for innovation in heuristics for choosing between forks of equivalent height, right? And if you see that a certain pool is maybe suspicious, then the next time it competes with another block, you just take the other block, right? And that's not something that requires a change, a fork in Bitcoin. It's just a heuristic.
Yes, maybe, but I think that also will have some dynamics that we cannot predict in advance. For example, when we speak here about this particular attack, we assume that the honest network will always use the block it heard about it first. So if people start not using the block they heard about it first, but use some heuristic, maybe it will be different dynamics.
It's difficult to analyze.
So that's actually an interesting question for the future. Like, if you're controlling a mining pool, say 15% network power, and you want to do good for the Bitcoin network, can you adopt some really clever strategy that specifically hurts these selfish miners? Maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, actually about this, this amplification hashrate attacks, so some of the suggestions I've seen is to make a built-in protocol rule to penalize blocks that using some sort of system, it tries to penalize blocks that could belong to the attackers. So that's
like having the reward for the second block. I mean, if the same pool finds the same block twice,
it's something in this direction. Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm done with the questions. Do you guys have any questions that you want me to ask you in order to make it look like some topic you wanted to raise, or just talk about something?
I think we're done.
Okay, so we can close it up. Okay, guys. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed talking with you and hearing your opinion.
Thank you.
Till next time.
Yeah.